I was excited. I was very excited. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I'm joined by my amazing co-host David Masterton. We're on a little bit of a train at the moment. We've covered a few different episodes so far on why am I so reactive, so understanding the science behind our overreactions, and then our next episode was how to handle triggers without taking the bait. So really wanting to look at and understand what is it when we're triggered, what's actually happening, and what's the difference between something that is what I call salt, hurting a wound. What is our responsibility, the wounding that we can then look at, but also what is that behavior? Now, where I really wanted to focus in this episode is focusing more on those chili behaviors or the acid behaviors. So I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. If you haven't listened to or watched the 2 episodes before this one, first of all, click subscribe so that you can get notified for our next episode, which is, well, what do I do about it? Then I want you to actually go back 2 episodes. So go back to the one that is called Why Am I So Reactive? Episode 76. I want you to watch that, listen to that, and understand that, and then watch episode 77, and then come back and watch this one. Because without that previous context, this one isn't going to make a whole lot of sense for you yet. And as I said, keep an eye out for our next episode, because that's going to be tying it all together, putting a nice little bow on it and going, okay, great, but what do I do about it? What now? So this one, oh my goodness, Dave, you and I both know about some chili or acid behaviors. We both probably have had more than our fair share of exposure to acid in our lives. And isn't it interesting that when we can do so much work on self-responsibility and self-accountability and our own inner healing and processing the wounding, that only then, well, at least this was my experience, only then was I able to be equipped to deal with chili and acid behaviors, put up a stand. My fear of rejection or abandonment didn't stop me from going, I'm actually not willing to tolerate that. That's not okay. If you want to be in my space, we're going to do this in a healthy way. Knowing that meant that sometimes that would look like loss.
Yeah, well, a big part of what we talk about is self-responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's about if someone talks to you about something and you feel something, it's not necessarily because of them. We have been big advocates of, is there something coming up that you're not aware of that you're going to put blame on that person for because they were the catalyst?
Yeah.
And so I suppose it's the difference between someone saying something to you and you feel like you've been punched in the face versus someone, and in this episode, someone actually punching you in the face.
That's right.
Because it's sort of like, I just feel like you've just absolutely hurt me so badly. Okay, well, all I did was show you a mirror or something like that, and you've gone and hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Versus someone sort of going, okay, because for whatever reason, I'm going to come up to you and punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Right? So what we're talking about here is self-accountability goes so far. So it's sort of like, and I think other people sort of said, but a good person will always turn the other cheek or something like that. Well, what you don't need to do is react, but you also need to be able to set healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. And there's a really fine line between self-responsibility and self-accountability and victim blaming. And I feel like that is where I want to be really clear that self-responsibility and self-accountability is important no matter what. But in the case of chili behavior and acid behavior, where there actually has been such a dysfunctional attack on you in an unhealthy way, whether that's been unhealthy communication or physical violence or just an abuse of your trust or whatever that looks like, whatever that acid behavior is, that actually, in that moment, you are a victim to something. It's whether or not you stay in it. It's how do you respond to that? Because it's not your responsibility, which means it's not your fault necessarily that they have done that or that situation has played out. But it is your responsibility. Think about the word responsibility. It is up to you to have the ability to respond to that acid. Responsibility is the ability to respond. So it's not,
As opposed to react.
well, react, and reactivity comes from a place of victimhood of I'm powerless and I don't have the ability to respond. You've taken my power away. And I'm a victim to that. I'm disempowered. So I feel like this is a really important conversation because it's a very fine line between victim blaming, and it's never saying it's your fault necessarily that it happened. But if something has happened and you haven't responded to what's happened to uphold a boundary, to communicate a standard, to change the behavior to a point of not accepting it anymore, not tolerating it anymore, well, then actually you now are actively participating in that acid. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a complex one.
yeah.
Because when you think about this, it's sort of like, well, let's keep it real simple. What's an ideal way to respond to this, and what's a healthy way to respond, and what's an unhealthy way? So I'll start with unhealthy. Let's just say, you sort of talk about acid, I talk about, if someone's punched you in the face, right? An unhealthy way is to basically react and punch them back in the face, right? That's the most obvious unhealthy way. But then people say it's self-defense and things like that. Well, if they've punched you and walked away and you punch them as they're walking away, that's not self-defense. You're going back. Self-defense is trying to deflect the punch and then back away. Another unhealthy way of handling it is being punched, falling to the ground, and never recovering from it. And then every time anyone comes near you, you cower. Now, you're not responsible for being punched in the face. That's
Well,
not
I
your...
was going to say that's another unhealthy response, which I see in women, particularly with DV, is when someone, let's say, punches them in the face. In this case, it's
And we're talking metaphorically speaking, people.
metaphorically. We're not
Yes.
necessarily talking about physical punching in the
No.
face. I mean, that's relevant too, but it could be even just throwing name calling out there, or really gaslighting behavior, or dysfunctional behavior, hurtful behavior. That there is a belief that they punched me in the face because I deserved it. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have been better. I should have been quiet. I should have done this. Now that is, I would say, one of the most unhealthy reactions to an acid behavior, is taking the blame on behalf of the other person's really unhealthy dysfunctional behavior.
And then we keep on going and then sort of go, okay, another unhealthy way is that situation may have gone, but then you act in a very aggressive, maybe not physical, but a very aggressive and very sort of, we'll say, venomous way to other people because of what's happened. So so you're not necessarily continuing the aggressive, the physical violence, but you're continuing the aggression. But it's okay, or it's not okay, but you can always point back to that moment in time as to why people must understand how and who you are because of this. So these are just some sort of the unhealthy ways. A healthy way of doing this is, let's just say, and again, it's metaphoric. So again, anyone who's been triggered by this, I deeply apologise, and hope you're getting the help that you need. But let's just say someone does punch you in the face, and you do get knocked on your ass, because generally, depending on how big the punch is, that's okay. You can get knocked on your ass. to then get back up. But what does that look like, getting back up? Well, it's maybe you might need to sit there for a little bit and sort of comprehend. And if you do feel pain from it, you feel the pain.
Gather yourself.
You allow yourself to go, okay, that did happen. Now, typically you'll probably need to put reasons behind it. Why did they do that? Why did this happen? Whose fault is it? Is it my fault? Is it their fault? Is it this? But a healthy way is to look at it and go, well, it did happen. And for whatever reason, it felt appropriate for that person to do it to me at that stage. Now, what is an appropriate response for me based on my values, based on what I'm seeing with all of this? So there's two ways. You can, from the unhealthy way, it goes into victim. They shouldn't have done that. They're the problem. They're the victim. Them, whatever it is, right? Versus, okay, that's not the type, like where if I was in a very heightened state, I don't resort to aggression. So it must be very difficult for them to get to that point to feel as though they need to lash out. To then be able to go, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for them? And what's the message, lesson, or, whatever it is, the awareness that I need to get from this while still hurting? Because at the end of the day, that person has done that action to hurt you.
Yep.
That's it. There was nothing, well, let's put it this way. If there's two people involved, they wanted to hurt you. Right?
I am going to challenge that.
Okay.
In the sense that we project unconsciously our unprocessed emotions and all of our own wounding and our trauma. So quite often, these acid or chili behaviours, as I call them, it is very rare for someone to wake up and go, how can I hurt this person today? How can I intentionally and maliciously cause harm to this person today? Generally, in my experience,
I will agree with that. Yeah.
people generally don't wake up and do that. Having said that, what people hurt others every single day, and their hurting of others, though not intentional and though not intended to be malicious, can still be extremely toxic and damaging and harmful, because that behavior is their projection of their own wounding. And the projection is so horrific and malicious and damaging that we're on the receiving end of it. So,
Yes, but being in front of someone, they wanted to hurt you. Whether it was intentional or not, they needed to shift whatever emotion was in them, and it needed to come out on you. How they got there,
that I agree with.
Whether
So
it's intentional or not, but they have, as the person in front of you, when I do this action, it is to hurt you. Whatever it is that I'm feeling.
For me personally, when I look at that, I would look at that as, I want to not feel this anymore, and I want to make it your responsibility for me to not feel it. But
Correct.
I don't, it's not that I want to hurt you, but it's, I don't want to feel this hurt, and I want you to be responsible for it.
I want you to feel this hurt.
I want you to be responsible for my hurt.
And to be responsible, I need you to hurt. Hence why.
Potentially. I'm just talking about from my experience personally, but also professionally. I don't see a lot. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because there absolutely are people who get so hurt in themselves that they think that if they can make someone else hurt, then their hurt is justified. So that can happen, absolutely. That if you did this to me and you activated my hurt, then if I can make you hurt, at least my hurt hasn't been in vain.
Yep.
My hurt is
But and I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, but I'm sort of coming back to the whether it's intentional or whether it is that way, they intended to inflict pain outside of themselves.
I'm going to give you an example. So let's say, for instance, I am holding a lot of my own shame and trauma, and my kid does something, and I absolutely fly off the handle in a completely dysfunctional, irrational behavior. Not for a second do I actually want to make my children hurt. I don't want them to be hurt, which is why it's immediately followed up with shame and guilt, because I know that I don't want to hurt my children. It's just that it was an expression, an explosion, a projection of what was coming up for me, and I wanted it to be their responsibility. You shouldn't have done this because now look what you've done. I wouldn't have exploded if you hadn't have done X, Y, and Z.
All right. So how would you then describe it? That when someone hurts you, what is it that they're trying to do?
So they're trying to self-soothe and process their own emotions in the only way they know how, in a very dysfunctional way. So it's kind of like an example. I think I may have shared this. My husband is not an angry human. He just doesn't really. He might feel frustrated, but he doesn't project anger. And one day he started really shouting and projecting anger. And about first 10 seconds, I was like super defensive because he was using me as anger porn, little niggly things. And so I was wanting to defend myself and justify myself. And looking at that, it might look like he wanted me to be hurt because of the things I had done to justify his frustration. But actually, about 10 seconds in, after I'd been trying to defend myself, I recognized that in that moment, it wasn't about what I had done. It was about the things that I had done that triggered something inside of him. And he was simply having an emotional orgasm in that moment, trying to process the energy of big emotion in his body that he needed to get out in that moment. And it wasn't even about me. So he didn't want to hurt me, and it wasn't because of me that he was angry, but in that moment he needed to process anger, and he did it projected towards me, which if I didn't have that level of awareness, I would have been hurt by it, thinking that he was just doing it to hurt me. So I look at it as anger porn. Quite often in those cases, all that person is just like literally going to a porn website, watching porn for your own gateway, if you like, to reaching a level of arousal. Except the arousal isn't sexual arousal, it becomes emotional arousal. So it's rarely about wanting to maliciously, intentionally or not hurt the other person, but it's about using that person and the stories and the associations that that person gives us access to be able to get out what we feel inside because we don't know how else to do it. So that's kind of how I see it. But as I said, there are definitely cases of people who will sit there and go, it's your fault that I feel this way, and I'm going to go out of my way to make sure you pay for that.
Okay. All right. So we're talking about now that there might be some, and that's probably where my energy was going.
Yeah.
Versus we can't sort of say categorically, which is what you're challenging. There's always that, which is probably what I said.
But it can happen.
But more than likely, they're fighting something that's not necessarily in front of them. It's just
within them.
Happens to be that you're there being projected like a good Snapchat filter.
Right. Exactly. Exactly what it is.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to, because I think we're starting to talk about a healthy way to process it.
Well, I'm conscious of our next episode being, well, what do we do about our reactivity?
Well, I think it's important to sort of go, what does healthy look like and what does unhealthy look like in this episode?
Yeah.
And then sort of how we can expand on it on the next episode. But it's sort of like, okay, it's not one of those things where it's sort of like you come into these situations as your completely fully healed self. Someone does crack you in the face and you simply go, well, that wasn't necessary, and move on with your life. And if you act anything other than that, then you got work to do. I think we need to be probably just a little bit more pragmatic about, okay, so look, we feel emotions.
I
We
would
feel,
even challenge that and say if that was your response, you've got work to do.
oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's like high dissociation, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. But it's more about sort of going, okay, you feel it, you try and understand. And this is a thing that I've found since you and I have spoken about it. It's very difficult to be curious when you're triggered in any way. If you can bring curiosity to any scenario,
Yeah.
then damn, it doesn't stop it from hurting. It doesn't stop it from this. But if you can look at it and realize, or any situation, and like any coin, you can only really stare at one side at the same time. And if someone goes, just go to mirror, you can see two of them. Yeah, true, fine. But there's only, you're only staring at one side of the coin. But if you can be aware that there's another side to the coin, while still feeling the pain, while still trying to process what happened, the thing about this episode is going, if after all of that, you decide that's not for you anymore, it's setting healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
It's being able to go, okay, you know what? That person reacted that way. I certainly don't align with those kind of actions. And that's not something that I will want to keep in my life. I will move on. And, whatever you put out comes back to you. So for that person, you don't need to worry about taking revenge. You don't need to worry about all of that. They'll take care of it themselves.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And then being able to go, okay, so this episode is about that, but also sort of knowing, just someone approaching me and walking past me on the street. Did I flinch and feel like they were going to hit me? That's the self-accountability about something I need to process versus who's accountable for that action.
Yeah.
I think is the crux of this, and I think I'm processing
Almost
as I'm
like
talking.
whose fault is it?
Well, yeah, and I mean, fault is a very simple way of going, there's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And when you come down to who is responsible for where does responsibility come into it? It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Because responsibility means I'm responsible for my actions, you're responsible for your actions. We just need to understand at what point am I responsible for my reaction and what are you.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily about.
And I love that differentiation, because when you're saying it's not about right or wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, or it was my fault. And this is why in couples therapy, when there's a focus on blame and shame, when it's a focus on, but he did this and they did that, and there's this justification kind of defensiveness and explanation kind of behavior where it is about right and wrong, it's not healthy. Because what you're saying with responsibility is different to reaction, in that reaction is going to go, well, that was wrong and I'm going to react to your wrongness. Responsibility is going, this is the reality. Let's stop judging it as right or wrong. It is what it is. We can't actually change it. But what are we going to do about it? Because if we take this thing, this dysfunction and this toxicity, this acid or chili as I call it, into our future, we are going to get burned again and again and again and again. And it is going to harm our relationship. It's going to harm our kids. It's going to harm our business. It's going to harm my soul. It literally will harm my soul if we continue to take this dysfunction and toxicity into our future. So rather than blaming someone, rather than putting someone at fault, rather than trying to justify it, what if just for a moment we collectively looked at it as a reality of what is and said, this isn't working. What are we going to do about it? And try that. And that's what a response is. The
Yeah.
response ability is about going, okay, I don't have to like it. I don't have to dislike it. I simply have to look at it, go, why are all the reasons that that's not working for us? What are all the reasons? What are we doing? What are we not doing? How can we try and do this differently? And then give it a go. And if we do it differently and we have a better outcome, oh my gosh, there's so much healing in that. There's so much
Absolutely.
information.
And there's a big thing about people that act out this way. And this is a thing that when you start to look at it and you know, the previous version of myself will look at the one side of the coin and go, all right, you want to dance, let's dance. You started, I'll finish it.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what?
I'll be right at all costs.
You'll pay for that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you won't pay for it now. You'll pay for it for next week, next year. Like, you know, there's that side of the coin. Then the other side of the coin is who or what hurt you to think that was an okay response? Because chances are, and this is the other side of the coin, this is the curiosity. And sometimes for my previous version, it hates it when I go into this mode because it doesn't allow this, I think you would say, emotional orgasm of, you know, this is what I would do to you and you don't know what you started and, you know, what? Because the other side goes, what is it that made them feel like that was okay? Or why, how are they lashing out? Or, and this is something that through one of the things that you've done in Rise and Thrive that would always pick to me. So like, what version of this person am I dealing with at this time? And most importantly, what age is this person? Is this version of this person? Because then suddenly it's all like, okay, well, if they're acting out and they might be very old, right? Age-wise, but you could be dealing with the 7-year-old version of them that's being triggered, charged, frightened as hell because something happened to them back at that stage which made them feel as though they needed to do that.
Yeah.
So when you apply this curiosity to it, you can process it. It doesn't mean it's okay. But what you can do is go, okay, you can bring a level of curiosity, therefore a level of understanding or awareness, and go, well, I'm that much closer to acceptance, not tolerance. Big difference. Tolerance is not acceptance. But acceptance means...
Got a podcast episode on that, guys. Go and check it out.
And when you can sort of accept that, then you can sort of decide, is this something that we can work on together? Because that action is not coming forward, but is this person coming forward? Yes, this person, I want to come forward. Can we work on it? Yes or no? Have we tried to work on it in the past? Yes or no? Has that worked in the past? Yes or no? And then you can decide, right, healthy boundary needs to be set because maybe this person can't for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
And then you just move on.
Absolutely. I love that. And look, this comes down to me, or down for me, to the philosophy of love. My number one value in everything that I do, my number one value in life, my number one value in business, my number one ethos when I'm working with clients and businesses and absolutely everything is love. But people have a dysfunctional view of what love is. And so for me, like, think about, okay, so biblically, one of the most famously quoted scriptures at almost every wedding is 1 Corinthians 13 from 4 onwards, where it says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others. And it keeps going. So there's a whole entire section. If you want to read this, have a look at all the different versions of it. So you just Google 1 Corinthians 13 from 4 to, I think it's 13. And the most beautiful thing about this is if I'm wanting to understand, is something salt or is it chili? People can, for instance, salt is like, oh, my husband made himself a coffee and he didn't make me one. And now I feel so hurt and upset by that. You know what?
If he loved me, he would have got me one at the same time.
That's right, exactly. Or it might be, oh, so-and-so, I don't know, didn't reply to my text message and I feel so triggered by that. Or
He just gave me a thumbs up.
Or so many people, you know, my friends went and organized this night out and they didn't invite me. Like there's all these little things that are pointing to our own wounding, but is it an actual threat to us if these things are happening? Am I actually in danger if my husband doesn't make me a coffee? No, it's not. That's actually not a chilly acid behavior. It's something that just happened and pointed to a wound in me around probably not feeling good enough or not feeling worthy or like not, he doesn't love me or whatever that might look like. So that points to my inner wounding. But when I'm thinking about what is the frame of reference that I'm using to help me discern whether or not something is salt or something is acid, is essentially this framework of love. And I ask, is it patient? Because if someone is lashing out with massive impatience, I'm going to look at that and go, I'm actually not okay with that. That's harmful. If someone is lashing out with massive amounts of unkindness, I'm going to set a standard. I'm going to set a boundary. I'm going to have a conversation about that. I'm not going to willingly continue to give someone access to me, access to my time, access to my life, to my information, when they're being impatient and unkind with me and malicious towards me, when they're being envious or jealous, when they're boasting, when they're dishonoring me. All of these things become this really amazing frame of reference for discernment around, is this something that I can say like even if it's just to myself, thank you for showing that to me. I didn't know that. Like playing a game of cards with my husband and losing 3 times and feeling a trauma response happen in my body. That's not unkind or dishonoring me or not patient or anything like that. It was just a scenario that happened that brought up something in me. So that's kind of my gauge for life, is going, okay, based upon these characteristics of what love looks like, anything that falls short of that, I'm going to uphold a standard. I'm going to have conversations with people. I'm going to say, hey, I'm really working on loving and honoring myself right now, and this doesn't align with me. This is what this would look like. If we were loving and honoring each other right now, this is what this would look, feel, and sound like.
And what's the chances the other person would say, you don't love me? Because
Well,
if you love me, you'd put up with this. Or if you'd love me, you would understand why I did
yeah,
it. If you loved me,
that's
like,
right. And so 2 things there, right? One is a dysfunctional love is never going to be punching you in the face. That's not love. That's, first of all, love is never going to be maliciously speaking about you behind your back. One of the things in my relationship is love to me looks like my name being safe in your mouth and my heart being safe in your hands. My husband's name is safe in my mouth and his heart is safe in my hands. I'm not going to go and stomp on his heart behind his back. And he absolutely, there is not a single cell of my body that would think that he would do that to me. But I've had relationships in the past where there was so much malice and behind my back. But that's not loving and honoring. And
yeah.
so if I was loving and honoring myself, would I continue to tolerate that behavior?
And that's okay. And, and that's where I suppose the other people that do come at you with these things, they've been taught exactly that way and probably treated that way.
Yes, exactly.
And to them, it's normal. And again, when you come across this curiosity or this maybe awareness or empathy for them, then you start to go, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I don't approve, but I understand.
Yeah.
So if you want to continue that way, I understand. I don't approve. My life is heading this way, and it requires these standards, these values, all of this. You are not responsible for your trauma. You are responsible for your healing.
Yes.
So if you want to walk with me, walk with me. If you
And I think
don't, that's okay.
exactly. I think that is the most important thing, is it's okay to express, I love you and I want to continue having this relationship. I want to continue our friendship. I want to continue spending time together. I'm working on loving and honoring myself, and this is what that looks like. I'm not going to continue to abandon myself to go out and snort coke on weekends, because that's not loving and honoring myself.
It's also very fizzy and wet in your nose when you do that.
I don't know. I've literally never done it in my life.
I was talking about the drink. Come on.
I've not done that either. And if you've snorted Coca-Cola, you're a weirdo. And
Well, you
I'm
had a
sorry.
great childhood. That and Whiz Fizz.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I think in terms of then understanding what are, it can be really confronting for people who don't even realize that they are exposed to acid behaviors in others, and particularly in
Well, when it
romantic
start,
relationships.
well, actually, you've nailed it. These relationships that hurt you the most are generally the ones that are the closest to you.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you're brought up, and let's just sort of talk about a parent-child relationship, that parent that's parenting you was a child once,
Yep.
and they had parents or lack of parents or whatever it was, right? Caregivers, lack of caregivers. And so your parent, what was their childhood like? What did they have to go through? Because basically what was given to them, they would have done the best they could, and then, or not done the best they could, whichever they chose. And then it's come on to you.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit like growing up next to a tip. You don't smell the crap because the crap's constantly there.
Yeah.
Or you get used to
I
it.
love that analogy. That's so powerful.
Well, it's like living
Growing
next to
up
a,
next to a train line. where
train line.
anyone who visits is like, how the hell do you live with this? It's so loud. The trains,
And
I
you go,
can't sleep. And you're like, I don't even hear it.
I don't even hear it. I don't even smell it. I don't even know
Yes.
it's aware.
It's the power
But
of
then,
familiarity.
but then somehow all of that happens, and then boom, from that, people around you going, God, that stinks. So like, no, that's normal. Oh God, that's loud. No, that's normal.
Yeah.
But what comes with that familiarity, what comes with that normal, means that there's something else that's out of whack
Yes, absolutely.
to put up with that.
I wonder if we give our listeners some examples of toxic behaviors. The first one that comes to mind for me is gaslighting. That's a really common word these days. But gaslighting is kind of like if you absolutely fundamentally know that something happened, that you told this person this thing, or you did this thing, or whatever it might be, that the other person will manipulate you into questioning your own truth or your own memories or your own reality. And they might say things, oh, that never happened, or stop being so sensitive, or things like that that kind of clearly invalidate you, make you question, maybe it is my fault. Like maybe I am the crazy one.
Yeah.
Gaslighting is absolutely an acid behavior.
Absolutely. And that comes in two ways. And, you know, I'm experiencing it, you know, fairly, you know, like as we speak. Gaslighting can come in two ways. That person absolutely knows, or they just have zero memory of it happening because it doesn't fit their narrative.
Yes. They
Right.
genuinely believe their version of the story.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing. If that wasn't the truth, what they've forgotten, or what is actually the truth would devastate them.
Would be too hard to handle.
Yeah. And
That's
I've gone,
Point.
and
I've known people like that in my life who genuinely believed their version of events, even though their version of events with many, many witnesses was not what happened.
yeah. And again, and now it comes down to who's right, who's wrong. It doesn't matter. It's their version
Doesn't
of
matter.
events.
Absolutely.
And so, but the one thing, because I've been accused of gaslighting, and one thing I've been accused of being a narcissist and all these things. So I dive into, well, I've got to ask myself the question: do I gaslight? Am I a narcissist? Let's be curious about it,
Yeah.
because normally people who are like that won't be curious about it. They'll just, you know, they will tell everyone why they're not. But you know, the funniest thing came out of the question about gaslighting and me being a parent
Yeah.
is the fact that there are parenting styles which will basically sort of say, okay, you protect your children at any cost. And I agree with that statement. However, sometimes how it's applied, I've gone, oh, that's gaslighting. Shit. and I've been accused and I've done it,
Yeah.
right? Now, we're not sort of saying full manipulative style of gaslighting here, but let's just assume for a moment that our kids can pick up on cues, energy, our emotions, and all of these things that we don't believe they can pick up. And let's just say for a moment, you're having a rough day. You really are. And it could be because of all of these really big adult concepts that the kids don't know much about.
The economy,
Whatever it is, right?
climate.
Interest rates, inflation, this, that, someone cut me off in the car and I got really angry and I'm not proud of it, or whatever it is, right? All of these things. And they look at you and go, are you okay?
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, I'm fine. And it's sort of like, whoa, hang on. Now just assume for a moment that your energy and everything, like you think you're holding it in okay, but really
You're painting that smile on your face. And
from the outside, it's like you're doing a
yeah.
terrible job. And the kid goes, are you okay? And you go, yes, I'm fine. And they go, oh crap, so why did...
So weird.
I'm picking up that you're not okay, but you're telling me you are okay.
Yeah.
So that must mean I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just a little thing. And it's like, okay, imagine just sort of going, actually, I'm having a really rough time at the moment.
Yes.
I'm feeling pretty beaten up, right? And then you can just hear these other parents going, we're going to be a good parent. You don't bring the kids into this sort of stuff. You shouldn't be telling them. Well, hang on. Just assume that they're picking up all of this correctly. And you validate their feeling, because what you're doing is you're encouraging them to say what you felt, what you picked up was 100% correct.
Yeah. And
Right? So,
thank you so much for noticing that, mate.
yeah.
My son is really awesome with this. I love you for bringing this up, Dave, because I feel like this needs a whole episode just on its own. But
What, how to gaslight your kids?
how we unknowingly gaslight our kids and the damage that does, because it disconnects them from their intuition. Because
Yeah.
intuitively they're feeling and perceiving something, and then we gaslight them saying, no, what you're perceiving is wrong, simply because we don't have the tools and resources to be fully witnessed or express our truth. That is
Or we're shamed by other people to say that's not how you parent. Because you've got to
Yeah.
remember, our parents parented or got parented, their
Yes.
parents got parented, and there's no handbook. It was
Yes.
just basically, we just model on, because all best intentions. Because
Yep.
why do you not tell the kids? Because I want to protect them, because I care for them. It
Yes,
just
I
so
wanna protect
happens.
them from these big things. But it also, my son is very perceptive, and he will say to me, are you okay, Mum? You seem stressed, or you seem a bit overwhelmed. And I am really open and honest with him, and I'll say, oh, mate, thank you so much for noticing. Oh my gosh, you are going to make such an amazing, loving partner one day. And and then I often follow it up, if you want to, because he used to say when he was little that he was going to be single forever. But I'll affirm him in what he's noticing, and then he'll say, do you just need, how can I help? Do you just need to talk? Do you just need to be alone? Or what do you need right now? And because we've modeled that to him. When it's, first of all, we observe, it seems like you might be feeling. It gives him the opportunity of going, yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. Or no, I'm feeling this. So that created self-awareness. But I really love what you're saying, because the take-home message is, if anyone is saying, are you okay? You seem stressed. If you are feeling stressed, learn the tools, learn the language to be able to say, wow, thank you so much for noticing. I actually am a bit stressed at the moment, but I'm not ready to speak about it yet.
Yeah,
Or,
and even if it's just your kids.
I don't need anything.
Because it's not about them having to fix it, even though they'll want to, a bit like your son. Because they'll want to go, actually, this is a moment where I can show that I care for you, and let me use some of the tools that you've given me back. Where sort of like people go, oh no, you can't do that because you're being a bad parent. Now,
Yeah.
okay, let me just say, as a little one-off, if that goes too far, and it's you're needing constant reassurance from your
Yes.
kids,
And your child
then
becomes your therapist.
pretty much, yeah. But allow them, because why is this important and why does this tie in to this episode or this concept? Because you're teaching your kids about the responsibility of actions, right? You're allowing them to be confident and go, okay, I can feel something's coming up for you. I'm okay to express it. Or actually, if I'm seeing my parents and I'm picking up this yucky energy and they say it's okay, then that yucky energy is okay. So when I feel that yucky energy, it has to be okay.
Yeah.
So what does that do? Well, suddenly that tip is now in your bedroom. You're not living next to it. It's now in your room.
Yeah.
Right. And so then suddenly that comes at a cost. That comes at capacity. That comes at, I have to maintain this, because if everyone else is fine with this yucky energy, then I have to be fine.
What's wrong with me?
And then exactly what's wrong with me? Oh, and today I'm suddenly completely out of capacity, so I'm going to snap.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
wow, massive side tangent, but I am absolutely going to note that, because hopefully our listeners agree that that's going to be really, really important to come back and go deeper into, in how can we, not necessarily how to not gaslight your kids, but ultimately the flip side of that is, how can I be present with my truth and communicate that truth about what I'm feeling to my kids in an age appropriate way.
What am I suppose in my mind, it's like, what am I repeating when it comes to, and I guess repetition is the core of generational trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or generational success, whatever you want to call it, right? It's the repeat patterning. So when you look at that, it's like, am I doing this because of repeat patterning, or am I doing this because it's not necessarily the right way, but it feels like, what am I modeling? What do I want them to do?
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I will make a note of that, and we can come back and talk about that, because I feel like that's going to be really, really important. But for now, let's wrap this episode up. We are going to come back in our next episode and talk about, okay, we know, why am I so reactive? We know what it looks like when there's things in our environment that are triggering us, our own wounding. We have a little bit more of an idea about what some of those acid behaviours look like, although we didn't get through any kind of list, but in an absolute nutshell, some of the things are like, if there's control, if there's neglect, if there's emotional blackmail, if there's constant criticism, love bombing, jealousy, stonewalling, these are all, even passive aggression, these are all examples in an absolute rent roll kind of style of some of the behaviors that are acid behaviors that are genuinely harmful to you, your soul, your healing and evolution. So next episode, we are going to be talking about, well, what do we do with it? Because I don't want to be reactive anymore. I want to be able to develop more responsiveness. And I don't want to be this yelling, reactive banshee anymore. I don't want to be playing out my trauma responses every single day anymore.
And I think also, just to wrap it up, if the person you're dealing with isn't curious as to the part they're playing in all of this, or seem to put the responsibility more often than not on you, that's also a bit of a red flag as to, okay, are we moving forward, or am I just going to have to tolerate it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But till next week.
Subscribe, guys, so then you're notified. As soon as the next one hits, that's going to be the absolute gold, the bow on this little package of series of conversations. So click subscribe, support us, share these conversations with people who you think need them.
Yep, hit the like.
Yep.
Comment below.
And support us. Thanks,
All right.
guys. See you
See you
next
later.
time.
Bye-bye.